Hello everyone, my name is Calvin with Montavilla Sewing Centers, and today we are going to be talking about the Embroidery Link app from Janome. This is a new app that they have released with the Janome Continental M17 sewing and embroidery machine. This app will allow you to edit your designs in a much broader way than you can on the machine. So it's really going to expand the capabilities of the machine. The first section here is going to be our file browser. Under here we have our device that we're on. So in this case, this is the main store iPad here at our main location for Montavilla Sewing Centers. And under that we have our folders and subfolders. Right here we have the Continental M17 because this is hooked up directly to the sewing machine. And under there we can see all of the files within it. From here we can select from the built-in samples, both USB slots, and also the built-in files to the machine. So if I were to click on the samples here, this is a primary folder, and then any primary folder will show subfolders over here. So I can either click on this folder here or this folder here. Both of them will take me to the same place. So these are going to be all of the alphabet embroideries that are stored on the device. Also all of the floral and garden designs that are stored on the device. If you do download any other embroidery files to the device itself, this is where they will go. Now I can also look at the Continental M17 folders. So if I go to the built-in drive, we currently don't have anything loaded on there. So if I click on embroidery, and this will be all the embroidery files, there's nothing there. I can use this little menu up here to navigate back through the folders that I've gone through. So then I want to check, I can see if I have anything in the ORD drive, which there's nothing there either, which no surprise because we haven't put anything in there. But also down here we have the built-in samples folder on the machine. We'll then see all of the built-in samples on the machine, and they have quite a few beautiful, beautiful embroidery designs. For this demo, I'll go ahead and use a design from the floral and garden folder, and that's this guy right here. So once we get here, it'll give us some information and a couple of options. First of all here, this will give us our size information. So in this case, we have a 2.79 inch width, 2.72 inch height, how many colors it has, and how many stitches it is. If you look down on the bottom right here, this is going to give us the option to either send it to the machine directly or edit the design. In this case, for the purpose of the tutorial, I obviously would like to edit the design. When you click Edit Design, it will give you a very quick menu that will display what the basic symbols that will appear on the bottom of the screen do. But I put this together to massively expand on what is here. Now when we enter into this, you'll see this little row of icons all along the bottom here. Each one of these has its own submenu and subfolder of icons. And so the purpose of this is going to walk you through each and every one so that you know exactly what every single one of them does. And I'll pretty much be going left to right. Before we get into that, I'd like to draw your attention to the top of the screen. We have two primary menus up here. One is the top right menu, is what I've decided to call it, and the view menu up in the top left over here. In the top right, we have two options. We have import. So this icon right here is going to allow us to bring in more designs using the same file folder we used before. So I could go to built-in samples, tap on a design, and it will import that design. Now I don't want to do that, so I'm going to use the undo button right here. The other one is send to machine. That's what this little icon is. So if I'm happy with how it is, I can click that button and send it off to the machine. Now keeping your attention up here, if I select something, that is going to give me a few more options. So in this case, we have the delete button, which will delete the design. Undo that. We have the cut button, which will cut the design, which will remove it, but then it'll apply it to the clipboard so that I can, as you can see, paste it, this little button right here. And then this little icon, that's your copy icon. So similar to cut, but it doesn't delete it. So if I wanted to duplicate something, I could tap on it and then click the copy, and that will copy it to the clipboard, which then I can paste if I want to. I can paste as many times as I'd like, and it keeps whatever is stored on your clipboard on the clipboard. So again, I love the undo button. I'm just going to undo all of that and get us back right to where we started. Now up in the top left we have another menu. So this has a couple of functions. One, we have our grid. This will activate or deactivate our grid. And this grid matches the one that comes with the hoop, so you can use this for positioning and placement as well. Also gives you a good reference to size. If we can turn that off. This right here is a 1-to-1 scale, which is very handy. So if I tap that, that's going to make the screen itself a 1-to-1 scale to real life. So I can take my actual device, and it could be a phone, it could be an iPad, it could be any size device. It will scale the screen so that this design is a 1-to-1 scale with what it's going to be. So you could take that and then take, say, a piece of fabric. I can hold it up. If I have a design, I can want to see exactly how it measures or how it compares. I can do that with this 1-to-1 scale feature, which I love. I think it's really nice feature that they decided to add into this. The other options here, this is your zoom option. So zoom level. If I slide this is going to increase or decrease the zoom. This guy right here is going to set your 3D on or off. So if I zoom in really far and turn off 3D stitches, it's going to show all the stitches in a two-dimensional line form. If I turn on the 3D, they're going to look a little bit more like threads. So that is the top left menu. On to the next section, I'll talk about these little sticky notes up here. So these are all of the different sections of the file for the embroidery. So in this case, we have one flower that's made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. Now of those 6 parts, I can move them in the order so that it will stitch them from left to right. So if I want, say, this to stitch second, I can grab it, move it into the second position, and now it will stitch this first, and then it will stitch that. For the selection, you'll notice I can tap on and off to select. So I can select if I tap it, to unselect it, tap again. You can also select multiple items, hold and drag, we'll group them together, and then I can move them wherever I would like. And that is the basics of the sticky notes at the top. Now moving down to the icons on the bottom. This first one right here is going to bring up this little submenu. Now I'll go through these guys left to right. This first one is a sort of a cleanup function. It will look for extra stitches within a certain tolerance and then clean up any stitches that don't need to be there. So if I go ahead and select my entire embroidery design by tapping all of those, click the cleanup function, it will tell me it has cleaned up 30 stitches that it detected did not need to be there, which is a really handy function to help keep your embroideries from bunching up really tightly in certain areas. The next button over is your Select All button. So right now I have everything selected, so I'll go ahead and deselect everything. If I click this button, it will select the entire, everything that's on the screen, so the entire embroidery file. If I want to, I can do an invert selection with the next button. So if I select these two and I want to select everything else except for those, I can invert it. And now I've selected everything except for those two. And next up we have another submenu. This is our selection submenu. So there are 3 different ways that you can select on screen. Up until now I've mainly been using these little guys up here, but I can also tap on the screen to select different pieces. What this menu gives you is 3 other methods of selecting. So we have box select, which if I drag and hold, will draw a box. Anything that is inside of that box will be selected. The next is the lasso tool. So this allows me to draw a circle, or any shape I want, really. I could do something funky like that. And anything inside of that will be selected. So I can tap off into empty space to deselect everything, then make a circle with part of the selection, and it will only select anything that's fully encased by the lasso. So you'll notice if I do this right here, it's only going to select what's in the direct center here because all of this is outside of this circle. If I do that, you'll see only this piece and this piece in the center here are selected. The last one is the swipe selector, which is my favorite. This means I can hold down my finger on the screen and it'll select anything that I touch. So I find this really useful for selecting letters and words, because I can just grab and swipe across a selection of letters and it will select all of them for me. It's very handy. I'm going to go ahead and keep that on because I like it. Now going over into the last little submenu here, this is just another, again, way of selecting. So this toggles our selection. Like I said before, right now, if I tap something, it will select it. If I tap it again, it will deselect it. That's what this is right here. The next one over is adding to selection. So if I tap on something and I tap it again, it's not going to deselect it because I can only add selection as long as this is selected. Same thing for the subtraction. This will only deselect. So if you're trying to go through a really complicated design, you want to make sure that you're not accidentally adding or subtracting from the design when you don't want to. Let's say I have everything selected, this guy down here, and I want to specifically remove this large piece. I can do that right there, and then there's no way for me to bring it back. So, lastly right here, this is our movement tool, which appears and disappears as you select something. So if I deselect, you'll notice it's gone. If I select something, you'll see it pops up. Now this gives us the ability to make really fine adjustments to the positioning and placement of the design. And if you tap this little number right here, it will actually give you the ability to change the increment in which you move the object in. So if I were to go ahead and say 0.25 inches, I want to move this by 1/4 inch with every tap. Then it'll move 1/4 inch with every tap. The default is 0.004 inches. So I'll set it back to that, which is a very, very fine-tuned adjustment. You can also hold, and it's very, very smooth. Lastly here, we do have our density and our color. So I can adjust the stitch density if I want to. Now this is a feature that would typically be reserved for a very, very high-end to mid-grade stitch editing software, and Janome includes it as a free option. So then we can also change down here the color, and this changes the display color, so I can make it anything that I want. I like yellow. Next up, we have the stitch editing menu. Now this one's a little more complicated, so I'll be separating out a few of the pieces so you can see things a little bit better. Okay, so I've gone ahead and separated out this guy, and I decided to change the color to green using this little box down here. This does the same thing that it did on the previous page, it's just here as well. Now the cut and stop function. These are two similar functions. Both of them are toggles, so I can turn them on or off. If they're highlighted gray, they're on. If they're not highlighted in gray, they are off. Now what these do will tell the machine to either cut or stop the machine at the end of a section. So say I have this one right here. I don't want a jump stitch to have to cut between this guy and this guy. I would want to make sure that my cut is on, so that it cuts right at the end of the stitch. Now before I get to these two, I'll talk about this guy. This is your stitch selection. So we can either use this little cursor right here in the center. If I hold it and move it to the right, we will advance in stitches. If I hold and move to the left, it will go back in stitches. I can also use the arrows here to go stitch by stitch. Now if there's any extra stitches in the design that you don't like, or if you want to separate a part of the design, you can use this function right here, which is to delete stitches. And that's right here. So if I tap that, it will remove the selected stitch. So I can do that with a few of them. And we are now, as you can see, deleting the stitches. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and use the undo button up at the top. Get all those back. Now this button right here will add a stitch, but it works a little bit differently. It will actually look at the stitch that you're at and the previous stitch and add a stitch in between them. So if I tap on that, we now have another stitch right in the middle between this one and this one. So You can go there. Now we're going to have a stitch there and then there. If I want to delete it, I can go back to it and press delete, and we have now deleted that stitch. That is just about everything with the stitch editing. Now we're going to move on to the coloring palette. So for the coloring palette, this is going to allow us to change all of the colors of the actual design itself. So for this guy right here, this is going to be our little menu showing you what we have right now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 colors. So if I were to tap on one of these, the floral pink, I can then come over here and change it if I'd like to. So if I like blue, I can tap that. If I like, that's light blue, I don't think that gives a lot of contrast. So darker blue, I like that a little better. And even darker blue. This is a really good way to just visualize your design and figure out exactly which colors you want to use on it. So that works for every one of these, so I can change any of the colors. Then if I come over here, I can click on fabric, and this is going to set what fabric we are using, and this is all just a visual to help you kind of visualize what your design is going to look like on your actual fabric with the colors. So not only can I choose this type of fabric, which does change the background there, but I can choose its color, which this is a fantastic way to get a really good idea on whether or not your colors are going to look good on your fabric. Then moving on to the text. Now for the text, that gives you some really fun tools within the program. First of all, we have our text box where we can enter our text. So if you tap on that, that's going to pull up our keyboard. So I like to say, capital H, hello world. Done. Very quick, very easy, and very responsive. I can use this little icon right here to actually set the placement of that text. So as I hold, it will bring it around. As soon as I let go, it will move the text to where the cursor is. Now right now you'll see that it's outside of the embroidery field, so I can actually come up here. The next one is I can change the font, and there are 12 different options for that. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the default. Then the next here we have the font size. So right now it's set to 18. I can use this slider and set it all the way down to a much smaller size that will fit inside of our embroidery field. Now for this next icon right here, this is going to be our text layout. So right now we have it set basically to be 90 degrees from a set point, and it's at a set distance. If I choose this will put it on a line, so I can then have 2 points to control, and that will allow me to put this text all sorts of funky directions and places and sizes, and it's definitely not going to like being outside of there. That gives you that functionality. And the third one here, the next icon over, we'll put it on an arc, so then I have full control of that arc, and I like that. So we can have our text on an arc. Next over here, as long as I select the text, it'll make sure this is selected. This will set our text alignment, so whether we are on the far left side of our line, arc, or the regular text box, whether I'm centered or right aligned. I like centered aligned, so I'm going to keep that. Then, if I close that, we then have the cut function, which will cut all of our jump stitches between the words and redigitizes it. If I zoom in close, you can actually see the stitches change a little bit there. And then lastly, we have our separator. So this will take all the words you have selected, or all the letters you have selected, and separate them out into individual embroideries. So if I click that, now each one of these is a separate piece. And right now it's one to make a new text. If you do ever want to enter more text, I'll zoom out here, you can simply tap on a new area, enter text, and then I can tap on another area, enter more text, and we can do that over and over again. I'm going to go ahead and undo both of those. Now, once it's separated, this is where we can get a little bit into the expanded capabilities by mixing and matching some of the functionality. So I've now separated it. I can come over back here to my selector. I can select, say, the W, and I can scale it up a little bit and move it around. Same thing with the H. Scale it up a little bit, move it around. And it can make for all sorts of fun little things you can do with words. That's a very, very basic and simple example. Now next up we have the arrange icon, which is this guy right here. I'm going to come back to the selector because I already know that it's going to want this to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to use my swipe selector that I like so much. Swipe to select all the text. Swipe to select all these pieces in here. And I'm going to scale this down. This does give you full ability for scaling, resizing, rotating, and it does recalculate the stitches for you whenever you do so. And if you've ever tried to do this in a machine before, you'd know that that should not be that easy. But with this app it is. Quite easy to resize, redigitize. You'll notice how all of the pieces are changing up here as I make things bigger or smaller. So this is going to be a little smaller than really you probably should do for the letters, but it's for demonstration purposes to make sure it doesn't try to make a file that's too big for the machine. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to come down to our arrange. Now what this is going to do is this is going to take that design and duplicate it any number of times with a certain amount of spacing in both the X direction and the Y direction. So this right here is across the screen in the X direction. And this second row right here, as you can tell by the little down arrow, is the Y direction. So I would like these to be spaced ½ inch apart. And I want there to be 4 of them going across. Then for the same thing, I want them to be ½ inch apart, and I want 4 more going up and down. So it's going to copy it in make 4 of them going across, and then copy that 4 times going down. So if I click apply, we're going to have this brand new array of embroidery designs. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can use this, but this is mainly to show you simply what it can do. Now these words are really, really tiny, and I wouldn't recommend trying to embroider letters that are like 3 stitches big, but that is to show you the basic function of the array. Now something worth noting that I probably should have mentioned a little earlier is for moving and rotating the objects within the selection mode. If you tap on one of these purple icons, that will change you between the rotation and the scaling mode. So I can always grab the center of the design, circle that, I just grab the center of the design and move around as long as I tap on the design itself. If I tap on one of these purple icons, that will change the icon, so we now can rotate, and we can also skew. Undo the skew. Now we also have this little center icon, which is another one of these purple icons that I can move around. And if I let that go, it will now rotate around that point, because that's our pivot point, basically. So if you have like a whole bunch of letters or words that you have arrayed in a circle and you want them to all rotate around an object, this you can set in the center of that object. Let's say the center was over here, and then I can rotate around it. Let's go ahead and get back into the scaling mode. Center that in the hoop. Okay, so I brought us back to where we were before we did the array or arrange. Now next up we have the hoop icon, which is going to give us a couple settings regarding the hoop. So for starters, I can come over and I can select any one of the hoops that are compatible with the machine. So let's say I want to do this one. Now you notice it's a bigger hoop, so as I zoom out, we have the full design, the full hoop right there, and the design within it. Tap this again to close it. This next icon is the fit to hoop icon. And if I tap that, it will take the design and fit it to the hoop. I can also rotate the hoop. So if I want the design to be oriented a certain way while I'm embroidering, I can do that here as well. Lastly, we have the slow draw function. This is a simulation that simulates the entire stitch out from start to finish. You can adjust the speed in stitches per minute by using this slider right here, and it will show you the entire stitch out. I can zoom in, I can pan around, I can look at what it's going to do and decide whether or not I like it. If I do decide there's something I don't like with the stitch out, I can see it all here inside the software before I even worry about putting it onto a project. So it's really, really nice. So if there's any inconsistencies, I can fix them without even messing up any part of the project, which I've definitely done before. And if I slow this down here, I'll go ahead. There's this little icon right here that will actually take it and center the screen over the point and put a little embroidery foot there, just as another little option for how it looks. I personally like watching it do this a little better. I think it's a little more fun. Now, last thing I really wanted to talk about is this little guy down here. This is your measuring tool. Tap on the screen. This will bring up a measuring tape, which will show you exactly how long everything is. I have this set to inches. You can also set the device to millimeters if that's what you prefer. I like inches because that's what I've grown up with. How to use this: we have the toggle on and off with this button down here. And then if I grab the center of the tape, I can move it around the screen. So I can do this to put the start point anywhere that I want. And I can grab the roll to rotate, lengthen, and shorten. And I can use this anywhere within the system. So if I come back over here and I want to see how big this whole design is across, I can do it just like that. And that concludes my tutorial for the Janome Embroidery Link app. This has been fun to put together. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about the software. There are a lot of different ways you can combine a lot of these functions and features to get all sorts of creative combinations. I've just wanted to put this together so everybody knew exactly what all the icons meant and what they did. So thanks for watching and have a lovely day.